Okay, the first thing we're going to do is to create a basic project. I've already done that with a basic plugin.yml and a main plugin class with our onEnable method. The first thing we're going to do is to create a game object representation. So create a new class in a games package, call it game. And here I'm going to refer to a custom class, which we haven't created yet. Game settings, call it settings, and a private set of game players, which will contain all the players in the current game. This is a new hash set, and then we're going to create a package private constructor. That's why there is no access modifier in front of it, so no private or no public. This means only classes in the same package as this class can access the constructor. In the constructor we are asking for a new game settings object, and then we just assign it to the class scoped game settings object. So this dot settings equals settings. Then let's create some getters for it. And now we can create the game settings class. Game settings. In here we're going to write all the attributes that a game should have. For now we only do the minimum and maximum amount of players. So final int min players and private final int max players. And then we create a constructor with those values. And we can also generate some getters for them. And at the very top here we can create a default game settings object. We make it public static final game settings and then default settings, and this will just be a new game settings object with, let's say, a minimum amount of 2 players and 16 as the maximum. Then at some point we want to save this into a configuration file. So in order to do that we need to implement configuration serializable, and from there implement the serialize method. If you don't know what that means, you can watch episode number 10 of the beginner series. So in here we're going to define all the fields and the values in a map. The first one will be called min players, and it has the value of get min players. And the second one, which will also be the last one in this example, will be max players, and the value will be whatever get max players returns. And this method is used internally by our server to save this object to the config file. And now we need to make a deserialize method to read data from the config file and create a game settings object from that. So create a method public static game settings deserialize, and make sure you don't have any typos in this method. It needs to be called deserialize, and the parameter will be the same as here. So a map with string keys and object values, and you can name them whatever you want. This will be in the format of what we specified here. So now we need to extract those values and create a new game settings object from that. Final int min players is equal to data.get, and then what you entered here, and you need to cast that to an int because it is an object by default. And now you do the same with max players. Final int max players is equal to int data get max players, and then return a new game settings object and pass the values and max player. And this is already it for the game settings object. And now we're going to create the game player object. Create game players class in this package. And for now this will only include a player reference. Create a constructor for it and a getter. Now in the game object, after you have imported everything, all the errors should be gone. And now we need something to actually create games, because at the moment, since this constructor is package private, we can only access this game class inside the game package, but we don't want that of course. So let's create a new class called game manager, and inside here we will have one method at the moment which returns a new game object, and we can call that create new game. And this returns a new game object, and the settings that we need to pass here will be game settings.default settings. We can also create a create game method where we can pass custom settings. So create new game settings, and return new game with settings. Now the next thing we need to do is to create a way so that players from in-game can invoke those methods to create a new game. And we do that usually with a new command. So create a new commands package, and inside that a new command class, for example called SkyWars Command, implement command executor, or let's actually do tab executor. We have talked about the differences between tab executor and command executor in the beginner series as well. This is just a simpler way to implement command executor and the tab completer at the same time. So you can see this is just a shortcut for tab completer and command executor. Then first let's get an instance for our game manager. And this is something we want from the constructor. Let's rename those parameters. Sender, string, we won't be using that, and args. And now the same thing as always, check if the sender is not a player. Final player, and if that is the case, then we want to send the sender a message. And for now, we will just hardcode the messages. In future episodes, we'll create a messages.yml for that and return true. And let's change that to return true as well. And now we just need to call our manager and the create new game method on that. And we can also send the player a message. Send message, new game successfully created in green color. Now go to the plugin.yml, create a command section and create the command here. Then in the main plugin, inside onEnable, type get command, SkyWars. This must be the same as this, but I'm sure you probably know this. And set executor, new SkyWars command. And inside here we need to pass a manager, which we create right above it. Final game manager. Manager is equal to new game manager. And inside the game manager, we're going to create a new method to actually save the game to a config file, because now at the moment we just return a game object but never actually save it to the config. So create a private method for that, save game to config. It needs a game as a parameter, and now we need access to our config file. So we can up here create a reference to our main plugin class. Call it plugin, then create a constructor for that, and then inside here we can access the config file via this plugin variable, like so, plugin get config, then .set, the path will be games dot, and then just a random UUID, then the object will be our game. Now we need to save with save config, and then we need to adjust our two methods here to use this newly created save game to config method. So let's save the new game in a variable, game, and call the save game to config method on here, and return the game object. This will be the same as for this method, except the settings will be our default settings. And then in the main plugin again, in the game manager object, we need to pass a plugin, which is in this case this, because we are inside the main plugin class. One last thing we need to do, since we used configuration serializable in our games settings class, we need to register this class as configuration serializable, and we do that in the onload block of our plugin class, and we just call configuration serialization. So we implemented the serializable interface, but now we're going to use the serialization class, and on this we use the method register class, and you just type game settings.class here. We do the same thing for the game object. So go in here, implement configuration serializable, implement the serialize method and fill it out. At the moment we only have the settings object that we want to save, so let's call it game settings, and the value will be whatever is returned by the get settings method. Go to the main class and register the game class as well. Now we're on the server, and as you can see, the SkyWars directory has not been created yet. So let's execute the SkyWars command, and now the directory is here with the config file, and inside there we have our game object with the random ID and the game settings object with the default data that we specified.